These are your notes on the Republic of Rome, the people and government. You should be looking at the note sheet that says people in Rome at the top of one side and Roman Republic government on the other. And we're going to start in the people in Rome side of your note sheet. So Roman history is divided up into two parts. The first is the Republic and the second is the Empire. And those parts are based on what kind of government Rome had at each time. So please look down at the second half of your front sheet where it says Government in Rome Republic and fill in the definition right here of a republic, a society where officials are chosen by the people. Who were the people of Rome? We're going to talk about the different categories of people who lived in ancient Rome. Rome had a fairly strict social structure. During the Republic period and later during the Empire, it was pretty much the same. The first group were the patricians. They are at the top in your People in Rome section, the first people on your note sheet. And they were powerful nobility. They owned land and they were upper class, and there were not very many of them. Then under them were the plebeians. Most people in Rome were plebeians or plebeians. You can pronounce it either way. The farmers, merchants, traders, artists were all plebeians, and they didn't have a lot of influence in the government. There were also slaves in Rome, and it's important to remember that, like Athens and Mesopotamia, slaves in Rome are not based on race. You would become a slave because you were captured in a war or for some other reason, but it was not a racial thing like we think of in the United States. If you were a Roman citizen, there were very special privileges that came along with that. So who could be a citizen in Rome? Patrician and plebeian men were the people who could be citizens. I'm on the citizen line, which is broken up into two. So under the first section, who, you should say patrician and plebeian men, and some foreigners, but very, very few foreigners got granted the right to be citizens. If you were a citizen, you had to pay taxes and serve in the military. Military service was mandatory for every single Roman citizen. The last group of people are the legions, and the legions are the soldiers, like you can see right here. The legions are the soldiers. Take a moment to label the pictures at the top of your note sheet. Label the patricians, the soldier, the slave, and the plebeians. And you should be able to tell based on their clothes and what they're holding which category they fall into. And we'll go over this together in class. Okay, let's talk about the government. You filled in the definition of a republic, a government where officials are elected by the people. And the Roman Republic had a representative democracy. And this means that the citizens elect representatives who serve in the government and represent their interests. This is like our democracy. We don't all vote on every single law. We elect people who vote for us and make decisions that should reflect the things that we want. So please fill in your definition for representative democracy on the front of your note sheet. Okay, what you need to do right now is flip your note sheet over to the back. We're going to fill in who these people in the government are. The first one we're looking at is Senate, which is in the middle of the note sheet in that big bubble. And you need to put all of this information there. So Senate means Assembly of Elders. There were 300 members. You were a member for life, and only patricians could serve in it. They would appoint governors for the different areas of Rome outside of the city of Rome itself, the provinces. They would debate different laws that came up, and they would recommend policies. They would ratify treaties and acts, acta, that would dictate the terms of relationships with other civilizations. They could declare martial law, so they could put the military in charge of Rome for a period of time. And along with that, they could approve of dictators. And dictators, which are at the top of your government notes, are people who would serve for a specific period of time, and then they would no longer be in charge. So you could elect a dictator who would be in charge, and maybe you were at war, and it was just easier to have one person make all the decisions than to have this big group of people trying to decide what to do. In the middle, above the Senate, are the consuls. There were 2 consuls at any given time. These would be patricians only. They were elected by the Senate, and the Senate could not make any kind of decision without having input from the consuls. And they got veto power, so each one could veto the other. Please turn your note sheet back over to the front where it says, under government in Rome, the 3rd term is veto. A veto is a vote to overrule the passage of a law. So if a consul did not want a law to take place, they could say, I veto this law, and it would not happen, which is a pretty significant power. Our presidents in the United States have veto power, but most of them don't use it very often because it is it's a big power for them to have. All right, who else is in the government? At the top, we have a dictator, a person, a man, always, who was elected to rule for a 6-month period of time. We have tribunes. There would be 2 tribunes at any time, and they would represent the interests of the plebeians in the Senate, and they would also have veto power. So, if you are a tribune, it is your job to stick up for all of the regular people, the non-aristocrats, the non-rich people. You need to fill out the patricians and plebeians section on this Rome Republic government yourself based on the information from the other side. So while we're talking about government, let's talk about laws. For much of its history, Rome didn't have a written code of law. Early Rome did not have a written code of law. Eventually, they wrote down their laws into the 12 tables. So this was the name of Rome's written law code. If people did not like the laws in the 12 tables, they could appeal the decisions that were made against them in court by going to court again, just like we do now. If you don't like the outcome of a trial, you can appeal it. And they would go back to court, and patrician judges would get the final say in their case. So you did have the option to try to get your case re-reviewed if you were unhappy with the law and the outcome, but chances are the patrician judges would probably uphold the law, which was definitely written in their favor, rather than change things for you. And we're going to talk a lot more about the 12 tables in class. Make sure that you have everything in your note sheet filled out. If you have any questions, be prepared to ask them at the beginning of class next time.